but you have to really have your material and your collateral buttoned up and crisp and sharp. Otherwise, it's just not going to pass muster.
Yeah.
So it really comes down to communication, and it comes down to stamina. And so if you could have your messaging tight and you can get the right people around the table and you just don't give up, you'll get deals.
Did you know that 91% of phishing attacks are conducted via email? Freight brokers are particularly at risk as email is the primary, really only option to collect carrier invoices, until now. ePay Manager powered by OTR Solutions is a back office automation and carrier payments platform that revolutionizes brokerage back offices with their proactive invoicing workflow, a centralized portal that gets you out of your email. The key to ePay's invoicing workflow is that the invoice is proactively triggered by the broker's TMS and is only created once the carrier reviews the details, which catches invoice disputes early on. This means that you can increase your invoice processing by up to 300 to 500% and reduce billing inaccuracies by 99%. Learn more about ePay by visiting epaymanager.com or text ePayFC to 80483 to see what they can do for your brokerage.
Today's episode is also brought to you by ControlChain. Struggling to find loads? ControlChain offers a cost-effective solution for carriers to secure more freight contracts with reliable shippers. Plus, you get a free tool that automates tasks like managing order details, updating customers, and sending PODs. Say goodbye to spreadsheets, emails, and phone calls. With ControlChain, you can manage everything on one platform, from planning and execution to getting paid. Sign up at controlchain.com and start receiving loads today. Find shippers fast with shippercrm.com. ShipperCRM is a FreightCaviar product, and it is the first U.S. shipper database and freight CRM. Stop wasting time searching for shippers. ShipperCRM is the fastest way to find the shippers you should be working with. This purpose-built sales platform offers 4 key features: U.S. shipper database, access 51,000 research shippers, Magic Map, a revolutionary search engine that helps you quickly find your ideal shippers, Magic Contacts, logistics contacts that automatically update themselves, Relationship Manager plus integrations. Seamlessly manage shipper relationships with built-in CRM tools and integrations. Supercharge your sales process with Shipper CRM. Learn more by going to shippercrm.com.
We've partnered with Ascend TMS, the world's most popular and top-rated transportation management system. It's the ultimate tool for all your freight needs. You can use our referral code RA-FreightCaviar! To receive 3 months of Ascend TMS for free. It only takes 20 seconds to sign up and no credit card is required. You can click the link below to learn more.
Welcome back to another episode of the FreightCaviar Podcast. You might have noticed I've been wearing the same attire for the last 4 episodes because we recorded 4 episodes in one day. It's August 22nd right now. It's beautiful summer in Chicago. And we have Charley Dehoney, the CEO and co-founder at Upwell, who actually flew in from Omaha, Nebraska, specifically to record this episode with us today. So Charley, thank you for flying in.
Thanks so much.
I am super excited for this episode. Like, I've known Charley for a couple years now. I've heard a lot about him. And funny enough, last week I was at the Bitfreighter Golf event. I was talking to Ryan Schreiber, and Ryan started talking about the GlobalTranz Mafia. It's like, you got to do a story about the GlobalTranz Mafia. And he was like, Charley's part of the GlobalTranz Mafia. And I'm like, all right. It's been a long time coming, Charley, and I'm so happy we're doing it here right now, not online. We're doing it in person. Talking about your experience, because you have a lot of experience. You do a lot of advising, and we have a lot of mutual connections. So I'm super excited for this episode. Before we begin, can you just give us a quick introduction to who you are?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Huge fan of FreightCaviar. Super excited to do this in real life. I've never been able to record anything in real life, so this is so perfect. Great day in Chicago. Amazing setting. You guys this is first class. So thanks for having me. But I've got 21 years in the space now, officially this month. I started with Worldwide Express right out of college. I wanted to be an entrepreneur my whole life. Graduated from San Jose State in the heart of the Silicon Valley. The only problem was there's nothing going on in tech at that time. It was 2003. Tech was in the dumps. The .com bust was in full effect. So this job that I had coming out to in my mind, coming out to like being showered with venture capital money and selling software wasn't there. So I had to interview with like 30 companies, going door to door. And I just was looking for something B2B outside sales. I wanted to get trained because I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to figure out how businesses run. And I interviewed with copier companies, postage meter companies, wine companies, office supplies, you name it. And after the field ride, I would always come home thinking like, I can't do it. But I went on a field ride with a guy named Ryan Venturini in Sacramento, California for a brand new office they're opening for Worldwide Express. And Ryan was a Division I college football player, just like me. He'd worked his way up out of the Minneapolis office and just come out to Sacramento. I get goosebumps thinking about that August day, walking in there. And then, a couple days later, we went out on the field ride. And you guys know how I feel about this, because once I went out and I saw logistics in the field, you can't unsee logistics. Good. So we were selling Airborne Express, which was the service provider ever to grace the American soil. And so what that meant is we'd have to go sell 12 accounts in 1 month to keep 4. Right? Because you're losing somebody's payroll, like some critically important document or machine part is not going to get there. And that customer is going to throw a stapler at you if you ever walk in that room again. But what it did is Worldwide had a phenomenal sales training program. That company, like the culture of the company, they had everything ironed out and laid out and documented for a guy like me who just wanted to be successful. So I was able to get involved. I went out to the August basic sales training class. Many of the people that were in my basic sales training class in August of 2003 are still with the organization. Some of them at the top level. So that shows you the quality of the not only the people, but the training, the retention, the opportunities for advancement that was created in that organization. So I spent about 6 years working my way up as a top salesperson right out of the gates. Found my way into leadership, and then ultimately got some sweat equity and some franchise in the Worldwide system. Had some exits in my 20s, which allowed me to bootstrap a couple of logistic companies in my late 20s, early 30s. So I learned how to pack, ship, drive, load, unload, you name it. If a customer needed to move it, I said yes, and I figured out how to move it. So building these two companies side by side, I bootstrapped the entire thing with ultimately the savings that my wife and I had. She was working first and became my partner, but we learned every lesson that there is to learn about how to get something from A to B and how to run the business on the back end. And then over time, I got really excited about Uber coming into the space, and I joined first Cargomatic, which is the first Uber chartering. And then I got involved with a company called Shiphawk, and then finally I co-founded Airspace. So I spent about a decade in the venture-backed ecosystem. That's where I learned how to build technology and raise venture money. And really, that's what cemented that I wanted to be around, just like you guys. I want to be around the smartest people, and I want to be around the most curious people in the industry, and I want to be a part of the change. And so after spending some time in the venture-backed space, I kind of, hatched a plan to get my family out of California. I wanted to move to the middle of the country. We were in San Diego. And I thought to myself, if I could buy a traditional asset in the logistics space, I could digitize it on the back end, create some cash flow efficiencies, and then I could repurpose that budget into sales. I could grow the business and then hopefully sell it to a digital player, because this was in like 2016 and 2017. And Flexport and Convoy were raising at SaaS multiples.
Crazy.
And I thought to myself, look, God love what we were building in Airspace. We were on a great path, and we had some of the biggest logos in the industry, like FedEx, using our platform. But we were being valued in a way that was going to make us unattainable to be acquired. And I thought if we just kind of hung out at the same path we were on, we'd get acquired. So as we continued to raise money in that business, I thought to myself, like, I wanted to create some liquidity. The startup stock is like monopoly money until you sell it one day. So moved to Omaha in 2018, took over a 50-year-old freight brokerage in 2019 with the vision that I just laid out. Quickly got to work automating the back office processes, got the team focused on going out and growing the business. So we doubled the revenue and had a fantastic exit in just 19 months to a company called FitzMark out of Indianapolis.
Wow.
So I spent just a little bit of time with the FitzMark team, quickly realized that I was a builder. I did not want to spend my time watching this big company get bigger and print money. So I'm still a fan, still an investor in FitzMark and supporting those guys. And our team at Manning's has gone on to become one of the most profitable branches in their system. So super proud of what we did there. But after that, I spent a little bit more time as a CEO of a private equity backed digital freight marketplace. And it was called FreightMaker. We were embedding financial products and transportation services. So you could buy container shipping with trade finance and insurance and all the other financial products involved. So that was during COVID. And I spent a lot of time looking at the finance markets and how money moved, because when goods go this way, money and data goes this way. So I really got focused on that side of it. And I made some bets in the angel space and in freight tech companies that were in and around freight finance, and kind of got up the learning curve there. And through that angel investing experience, I got plugged in and got the opportunity to run a large accelerator in the logistics tech space. So I spent 2 years working with 12 of the largest transportation companies in North America, helping them map out opportunities to bring in technology into their operations. So companies like BNSF, the Port of Virginia, CMA CGM Group, Viva Logistics, large trucking companies like Road One came into this platform, ZBox, and we partnered up, and my team would go out and find areas in their business where we could bring in early stage companies and drive innovation. Then we would match them up with startups. And so it was through that experience that I really saw what was keeping these big companies up at night. And I also saw these big companies were starting to spend a lot of money on software. And if you could bring a software in that was specifically designed to solve one problem, that these big companies would put it to work. And so I decided about a year in to pick one of those problems off the stack. And accounts receivable automation, for a number of reasons, is something I've been thinking about for a long time. And so started to look at space, got really excited, and reached out to an old co-founder friend of mine that I'd worked with in the past, and started building Upwell, and here we are today.
Hey there, amazing listeners. If you're enjoying what you're hearing on our podcast, we need your support. It will only take a moment, but it would mean the world to us. Please make sure to hit the like button on this video, subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to share with one of your friends that would enjoy our content. Your engagement helps us reach more people and bring more awesome episodes to you. Thanks a million, and thanks for being part of the podcast community.
So cool. Awesome. Yeah. Before we get into Upwell, I think there's so much to dissect from your story, and we have time right now. It's the last episode of the day. You're not in a rush. You're flying out in the evening back to Omaha. I'm trying to figure out, okay, first of all, where does GlobalTranz fit in this picture? Curious, because I want to talk about, you did write an article on FreightWaves a few years ago about it, talking a little bit about that, talking about the sales experience, how you were able in 19 months to take, it was Manning's, right? To be sold by FitzMark. Can we talk about like that stuff? I'm really curious. I feel like our audience is also.
Yeah. Look, so many of us got into logistics transportation because we love the deal. We love freight. We love finding customers. We love securing trucks. And ultimately, I knew from a young age I was going to be a salesperson. My dad told me forever, I'm a fourth generation salesperson. So anybody that knows me knows that I love to get out and talk to people and find ways to work with the folks that are the best people out there. But really what that all started with is at Worldwide Express. There's very, very rare that you see classical sales training applied in logistics. And we were so different at Worldwide because they put us in a suit and they gave us a script and they gave us quotas and targets. And a lot of the stuff that they made us do and a lot of the things that they said to us in these trainings would get a company canceled today. But the type of person that they brought into that organization in the early 2000s was a guy like me that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted a shot at being successful. And I just needed somebody to give me the framework. The only reason I graduated from college is because as a Division I football player, if I didn't go to class, I wasn't going to keep my scholarship, and I wanted to be able to play on Saturday. And so there's compliance and governance that goes along with keeping your scholarship. So having that same type of framework handed to me at a young age, and somebody like Ryan Venturine, who took me out in his car and said, look, man, they're going to take you out to Dallas for a week. If you learn that script and you come back here and you just say it over and over and over again out in the field, you're going to accidentally get some deals. And by God, it worked. And so what I did is I took the opportunity at Worldwide and I ran with it. In my 20s, I gave my 20s to my career. I didn't go to all the weddings. I didn't go to the only bachelor party I went to was my brother's. I didn't have a bachelor party of my own because nothing mattered to me more than creating a path from the sort of impoverished background and sort of upbringing that I had, and to create a path towards wealth. And I knew that logistics could be that for me. So as I got out of Worldwide Express, I knew how to sell and I knew I could grow. And I thought foolishly that I could do all the other stuff well. So I decided, hey, I've got, a couple of years worth of salary saved up, in the bank. Let's make a run at this. And I found out quickly that the back end of logistics and transportation is a whole different beast than getting out there and making promises to the customer. Somebody's got to keep that promise in the back end.
Yeah.
And so the best thing that ever happened to me was when my wife left her very successful job selling software to come and get my ass in gear, get my back office in line. And when my wife stepped in and she started asking me every single day, why are we doing it this way? Are we even making money? And she started asking the critical questions that were asked of me previously as a P&L owner in a big company. But she was asking to me, on a deep level. The person that I admire the most in the world, the person that I care about and trust the most in the world, is looking at me saying, hey, look, you're out there promising the world, and these customers are in here just basically dumping all their bad freight on your back office. We need to do better than this. And so what that did is that really gave me this bird's eye view and this like 360 degree of every hour of the day. I was thinking about running an efficient business, because it wasn't just about making money. It was about keeping the people around me happy as well. Because if your team isn't happy and everybody's going home beat down every night, they're not coming back. Somebody's not coming back. So as you fast forward and I start getting involved in companies like Cargomatic and I start getting involved in these venture-backed startups, I saw that folks that were coming in to build in the ecosystem, they had great operators. There was some great technologies, some smart people coming in, but that application of going and having shipper talks and having real operational talks with the team on the back end to make sure that the service provider and the shipper are both singing from the same sheet of music and our technology is actually enhancing that relationship, that takes a lot of work. So every single step of the process has to be designed towards everybody marching towards the same goal. So going back, I guess, in my career, how does GlobalTranz come into this, and really where does like sales and go to market? Like, what is that? That's the undertone of everything that I've done in my career. Coming out of Worldwide Express, GlobalTranz was on a tear. They were probably the second, third company out there to put LTL online, which was a big deal. And they were growing really fast. And Andrew and Michael had found a way to get out there and build a company that was really, really starting to take some market share, but they didn't have that sales leadership. They didn't have that strong architecture with, sales leadership on top, training and development for everybody else out in the field. And so they looked at Worldwide Express people who were already trained as opportunities. So as folks started to lead the Worldwide Express organization, guys at my age group started thinking maybe there was ownership potential out there for us. Well, Worldwide didn't have any more franchises for us. I couldn't talk my wife into moving to Omaha, Nebraska back then. So I had to figure out another way. So GlobalTranz had been, a known kind of entity to those of us that were looking for a path. And I partnered up with them and got to work and quickly became their fastest growing agent. Really had a great culture. And in those days, I was transitioning out of this like franchise-based culture, but it was a very, very strong centralized corporate culture where as a sales manager, my paycheck came from a franchisee, maybe that wasn't in Dallas, but all of my information came from those folks in Dallas. Then I go to GlobalTranz and there's some tech, there's some rates, but it's the Wild West beyond that. And everybody was out selling. There was no geographic territories. There was no boundaries. And honestly, that culture worked because they got good people in that wanted to build a business and they grew really, really quickly. And Andrew, looking back, over the last, I've known the guy now for, 15 years, 16 years. Andrew and Michael both are two of the CEOs that you can't take anything away from those guys and the way that they have evolved from just two brothers that grew up in freight, and Andrew's this military guy. He's Mensa smart, and they put something up in the cloud and got some people selling into it, and it just attracted these curious people that wanted to get ahead, that saw logistics that we all knew it was growing. We had no idea what it was going to become, and that's where I crossed paths with some of these people that have become foundational, not only in the industry but in my personal life, my career. Investors in my company and several companies. And really at the core of it, the relationship was built with the Leto brothers because when I met them, they knew that I had a reputation with Worldwide Express, and they knew that I could come in and build an organization in their framework that was going to grow. And a lot of people did.
I'm curious if, Charlie, you could tell us a little bit about who is part of the GlobalTranz Mafia. Break it down a little.
Yeah, I know I'm going to forget some people here, and I'll omit some people here intentionally because GlobalTranz, depending on who you talk to at what time they join the organization, can be a very polarizing topic. So, there's varying opinions out there about the brothers Leto and about some of these other characters that have come through, but I tend to always look back on the past with like rose-colored lenses, and I always remember the best things about people. So, going back through the list, you've obviously got a lot of people don't remember Andrew's full track record, but after he got out of the Navy, starts GlobalTranz. He leaves there. He goes on and builds 10-4 Systems, which was the first visibility platform that he ends up selling to Trimble. And then he goes on and eventually founds Emerge. The other guy that was really, really instrumental in growing GlobalTranz, that was really on his way out as I was coming in, Jet McCandless spent a couple of years really out in the field building the GlobalTranz network, working with carriers, recruiting the agents. Jet was that kind of like guy that would come out and teach you how to build your business. And so when I was first looking at GlobalTranz, Jet spent some time with me at their Newport Beach office, showing me around. And a few weeks later, he wasn't there, and I didn't see him again until Carrier Direct had popped up, and he had Shift Freight and a number of other things before Project 44. But Jet is the guy that really like has lit the world on fire. And again, just another CEO that just has been foundational in our business, supportive of the industry, one of the nicest human beings you're ever going to see, but also just ridiculously smart and saw the industry in a way that nobody else did. And then you've got Michael Bookout, who's leading my carrier right now, he was I think chief technology officer, maybe something in pricing, something like that. You've got Dan Bebout, who built I'm drawing a blank on the name of his platform right now, but he sold a Convey. It was like a platform for e-commerce companies to help manage their final mile. And then he sold that to Project 44.
Okay.
You have, let me think here for a second.
So I'm curious, just like you brought up My Carrier, and now there's like the lawsuit between My Carrier and P44. So
I don't know much about that. I'm not shocked that these guys are getting tangled up. There's a lot of green field left in logistics and transportation, but there's still a lot of overlap in a lot of these platforms that have come out. So, knowing both of those guys really well and, sort of being close to both of those companies in different ways, it doesn't give me any more perspective, or I'm not privileged any more information. Sure, everybody else. But, the reality is both those guys are building really nice businesses, and Jet has built a business to this at this scale where, he's got a lot of smart people looking out at every angle, for the success and health of his business. So, I hope we don't see a lot more of that, but I got to believe that we are going to, as our industry continues to mature and, ground is laid. But there are a number of guys in the recruiting space, and a number of like the top transportation logistics recruiters in America are from the GlobalTranz network.
Yeah.
So there's guys like Kevin, KJ McMasters, who has a company called Talent Solvers right here in Chicago. You got Brent Dorsuga, who Brent recruited me into GlobalTranz many years ago. And Brent runs Pinnacle Growth. I mean, if you don't follow Brent, I'm sure you know Brent, but just he was one of the original sort of like personalities out there talking about freight, talking about sales, and really, I think one of the few guys that I think thinks about business the right way and really tries to partner. And so their talent organization there was incredible as well. And you've got a number of brokerages that were spawned that are still running, all around the country that were in and around GlobalTranz. So I wish I would have thought about this and got back through that article, because it was really fun when I wrote that. It was probably 2020, maybe 2019 when I wrote that. It was really fun just going back through memory lane and getting on the phone with all these people and talking through, who's doing what now and the times that we had. And I mean, look, like building anything is a bloodbath, right? And so there's going to be carnage, there's going to be collateral damage. And so I take the bad feedback, with a grain of salt, because like I said, there's several people that are running big brokerages that I reached out to that didn't want to be in the article and they didn't want to be connected to it. And I only spent, 14 months in the GlobalTranz network before I ended up, taking my brokerage on and moved to another platform before ultimately getting off on my own, get my own MC number and investing in technology that way. But, I look back at that time as just, it was awesome that, God put me in a situation where I could, get involved, meet all those people, get that business going, get it off the ground, leverage their tech, leverage their momentum that they had, and ultimately build something for myself and my family that allowed me to change the path of my life.
Sure. Mm-hmm. I think it's taking a path on your own and, being in control of your own destiny, as you were mentioning on an earlier podcast today, is like super important. It takes a lot of courage, to do that. But I think you had a lot of, support and resources, and I guess also that experience too of like knowing what you're getting yourself into and being kind of attacking from a point of authority. Like you kind of knew what you were going to go when you started your first business after GlobalTrans, right?
I think it was a perfect time for me because I was in my late 20s, so I was still arrogant enough to think that I could do it. Sure. Without having all the information that I probably needed. And one of the things that I look back on that business now, and that freight brokerage business that I started in 2007 or 8 from my apartment. At 8, we scaled it quickly, $10-12 million in top line revenue. So it was a nice lifestyle business, but like many people, I got stuck at that level. And it really came down to back office and capital and working capital. It's really hard to grow in transportation unless you have a backstop. And thinking about that business now, knowing what I know now, I would have raised a little bit of equity, taken on one partner, maybe got a debt line and grown that debt facility over time and scaled the business to $1 billion. But I didn't see private equity coming in and rolling up brokerages like they have. I didn't see the technology platforms coming in and ultimately being like what is going to unify these transportation logistics companies. So you don't know what you don't know. So I like to think what I love about transportation is like it's an industry where if you want to hustle, you can go be an agent for somebody and you can work on your own laptop and start tomorrow. So I'm glad that I started. I'm glad that I didn't know too much. because if I knew too much, maybe I never would have. But when I was building my first oil company, in my mind, I felt like, look, even if this doesn't build me wealth, it's getting me out here and I'm learning what I need to know.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't trade it looking back.
There's this like meme or like a flag, a photo of a flag that says, we don't do this because it is easy. We do this because we thought it was going to be easy. And I feel like I think about that all the time, especially when I also opened my own brokerage, and the back office was literally the thing that always held me back. Well, first of all, it was like, I don't have a credit score. I don't really have a lot of cash. Everyone wants me to pay upfront 50% delivery. And it was such a hurdle and such a pain. And you kind of, when you're sitting working at a brokerage, and I was a W-2 employee, like I just was working on the operations side, I didn't realize how much goes into it. And I feel like a lot of people that have never owned a brokerage think it's so easy. Like trucking companies are like always getting, mad at brokers. They're making all this money and all this stuff. It's like, well, just open a brokerage if you think it's that easy, and you'll realize that it's actually really difficult.
Right.
But I'm curious, Charley, if we could talk a little bit about the brokerage that you acquired, right, in 2019. And then you built it up and you have all this freight sales experience. Like, why do you think that you were successful in coming into like a brokerage and like being able to, within 19 months, get bought out by FitzMark? Can you walk us through that? Like because I'm guessing you've probably put a lot of work into building up the sales machine or whatever that is. Like, we have a lot of customer sales reps that listen to this.
Yeah.
Like, what are like some tips maybe, or like some feedback that you see in an issue that you'd want to educate others on?
ePay Manager, powered by OTR Solutions, is a back office automation and carrier payments platform that revolutionizes brokerage back offices with their proactive invoicing workflow, a centralized portal that gets you out of your email. Learn more about ePay by visiting epaymanager.com or text ePayFC to 80483 to see what they can do for your brokerage.
Yeah, it was a really straightforward process. It was a playbook that, frankly, it worked, and I'd run it again if given the chance, and happy to share with anybody else. And if anybody wants to take a swing at turning something around, it's pretty simple. So first off, you'd rather be lucky than good. So I acquired a great platform. Like, we bought this 50-year-old company that had a great reputation. They were the best broker out there that nobody had ever heard of, but they also had a really tight niche. They were geographically focused on moving just a couple of products in a very, very tight radius, which gave them a competitive advantage. Okay. Now, a lot of people that looked at that business before our group did got hung up on their customer concentration. And customer concentration, for those of you who don't know, when you're looking at a business to acquire, you have to worry about like, well, hey, do they have too much of their revenue coming from one or two customers? And also, if I take their customers and I put them on top of my customers, do we have any overlap there that's going to create unnecessary customer concentration on this side? Because when you go to sell your company, you're going to have to answer the customer concentration question. When you go to recapitalize your business, or you want to raise some debt or some capital, you have to explain this and say why this customer, even though they represent a large chunk of the revenue, here's why we're uniquely suited to keep them. So once I got comfortable that company had this customer for their entire 50-year history, it was obvious to me that they were doing something that was so unique for that customer. We just needed to go do that for all of the other customers that had similar shipping profiles to that. But before we could do that, we had to make sure that first, the people trusted me. And even if they didn't trust me, that they didn't hate me. Because if they hated me, they were going to sabotage and they were going to work against me, right? So the first step in helping something is not hurting it. So although I had this really opinionated strategy that I came into the opportunity with, that was between the investors and I. That wasn't necessarily like what I went and put in front of the team right off the bat. So I spent months watching, 2 months, just watching, listening. I didn't put my office in the back where the previous owners was. I put my cube right out in the middle of the bullpen so I could hear everything that was going on. But I didn't offer a word of advice. I didn't suggest anything because, number one, they knew way more than I did about brokering freight. And number two, nobody gave a shit what I had to say. They had freight to move. They didn't sign up to turn the business around. I did. I had to meet them where they were to do that. So after monitoring for a while, I had validated a lot of what I'd already thought because I saw the same movie there that I'd seen in other businesses before. I just came to them with a much more curious perspective where I started telling the team, Now it's time for me to really start to dig in and figure out where everybody's spending our time. And I knew the answer to that, but I wanted to make sure that they knew that I knew the answer to that. So I got really scientific with it. And I probably over exaggerated certain parts of this, but I wanted everybody to see that I was in it with them. And I was kind of there tracking all of these steps that they were taking. And then I mapped out our process, and there's 16 steps in that company from order to cash. And there's X number of pieces of paper, and there was a folder involved. And once I mapped out all the steps and I put it into a spreadsheet, then I started standing behind people with a clipboard and a stopwatch, and I started tracking people at how long they take in doing certain things. Have you ever asked somebody how long it takes them to do something simple?
No, well, yes, in a way we did that for Shipper CRM. We have some validation of some shipper data. So for whatever reason, I did actually stand with a stopwatch.
Yeah, but for whatever reason, my experience is if I were to say, hey, Paul, it's curious, how long does it take you to build that load? Oh, just a couple minutes, 5 maybe. I mean, people always just give you this like low number. But what they don't always take into consideration is the amount of time that it takes to stop what you're doing, read that email, digest the order, get back in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, go to the restroom, fill up your coffee. Next thing you know, it's like 20 minutes have elapsed. So you did the last thing. And so I wasn't tracking all that gray space. What I was doing is just saying, from the time you started till the time you did this, it was, X number of minutes, and then I'd move on. But over time, I had enough data to support what I already knew, and the team knew that I knew. And we were able to start to make suggestions around, hey, look, we still got a bunch of people making check calls. These are smart people who have been with us for a long time. We all agree these people could probably do more. So what happens when we got them out of check calls? What is the other stuff that we could have them doing? Once you start to get the groups to start to rethink it, not everybody cared. Not everybody wanted to weigh in, right? Some people just want to come in and book their freight. But some people do want to talk. And once you get those people talking, that's when I started to be able to make some suggestions. Said, hey, there's new technology out there. Let's look at these tracking technologies because MacroPoint, Project 44, WorkKites, they were all hitting the market. We ended up going with Trucker Tools because Trucker Tools had just built an integration to where I could still leverage those 3 other platforms, but I also had Trucker Tool tracking embedded on that app. So once we put in Trucker Tools and we got the check call burden taken off the team, then that was a win for me because the people that were doing the work, the people that everybody relied on, were freed up, right? And for the very first time, they were coming to the broker saying, hey, how do we do this? And then, then we carried that forward and we started reimagining, hey, like, you're really good at pricing. We only have 2 guys really that price all the freight in this entire office. Why don't we move to more of like a cradle to grave model, or a Chicago style model? Right now, it's kind of cradle to grave, but really it's like one genius and a bunch of helpers, right? So what if we get that genius guy just focus on bidding more loads, and everybody else can take over the rest of the stuff? Well, that takes some time because one of the things that is unique about people that get into logistics is we all think like, well, I can't let somebody else do that. No way in hell anybody else can do that.
Yeah.
I'm the only one that can do that, right? So you have to unlock all of that, and it's slow, it's tedious, but once we got people thinking about what they like to do in the business, and then we got, the other people organized around the other things, then we were able to go to the Chicago style model. Then we were able to start to put in, some tooling in the back end. And, we had, one person in the office whose entire job was to get the carrier bills and make sure there was a physical copy of that carrier bill. So when that order was turned in and that order was completed, that carrier bill could be matched up and that carrier could get paid. Well, that's a lot of paper, and I don't care so much about the paper as I do about like the time that everybody's spending. Is like, why are we doing these folders when we have a best in class TMS right now? Like, it does all of this stuff. So, we really, it was painstaking, but 6 months, 7 months in, we had put HubTran in on the back end. All of our carriers were emailing in all their invoices. The document lady had gone away. We had repurposed those budget dollars into the first ever sales role that this company had ever had. Now, that's where the sales comes in, because I wasn't going to go invest in that salesperson until that back of the house was hyped. Because for the same reason your business struggled when you had your first brokerage, mine did too. Why did we start a brokerage? Not because we want to count the money.
Yeah.
Not because we want to pay the carriers. And when I started digging in on that back of the office stuff, oh my God, I realized if you wanted to get paid from us, all you had to do was call. That's it. So factors, a factor calls you the first day they send you an invoice. Hey, did you get that invoice? Yeah, I got it. Okay, when are you going to pay it? The day it's due. Well, no, this lady was just paying them, right? So we had carriers that were just stopping by the office and walking out with a check, and she's dropping everything she's doing to go see this guy and, write him a check. And look, I mean, I want to take care of the carriers. I want to be fair. And if a carrier needs an advance, like, we weren't charging for those things, and we had a strong balance sheet, so we didn't have to. But the reality is we also didn't need all of our money sitting in our carrier's account. And conversely, on the receivable side, if you didn't want to pay us but once a quarter or, every other 6 months, that was fine. They were good for it. Well, these great people in Omaha, Nebraska were trusting everybody with their money. And what that meant is our cash was spread out in our carrier's account and our customers' accounts. It's death by 1,000 cuts. So we put in HubTran, we organize our payables, we start paying on the date that the invoice was actually due, and we started expecting our customers to pay on time. We put in the sort of best-in-class process of sending your customer a statement every single week, making sure that they have all of those invoices, calling and follow up when they're past due. Basic blocking and tackling of collections that when I was at Worldwide Express, they had a system for it. And if you ran their playbook, your collections were over 95%. If you didn't run their playbook, you had a mess to clean up. So what I saw is what I always knew from running Worldwide Express franchise, running my first brokerage, is that collections are like cleaning your room. If you do it every day, super easy. Nothing, right? Yeah. But if you let it build up, it's a big mess that you're going to have to address, and you give it your whole weekend. So as we started to get that cleaned up, we had a small company there, but we put $1 million, $1.2 million of working capital back in the account. And the investors are seeing the daily balance grow, and they're going like, Charlie, like, don't piss off the customers and carriers. Like, we can't, rock the boat. I'm like, look, like, we're good. Like, people will pay if you ask them to. Shippers want to pay you. Most of the time. They play games, everyone, there's bastards. But for the most part, shippers want the truck to show up. So they want to pay the broker, and they want the broker to pay the carrier. So with all of those learnings, we had more money in the bank. I had the trust of the board because they're like, dude, Charlie's got all this capital right now. Like, this is not as much of a risk to go out and hire another salesperson. So once we had the back of the house in order and we could go put a salesperson in place, now I could invest my time in showing that salesperson, look, if you look at what we're good at, moving seed products and agriculture products around the Midwest, but not even the Midwest, just the Corn Belt, Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota, Colorado, just this real tight area right around here, Illinois. And when we really mapped out those states that we were good at, we came up with, hey, we're a short haul carrier for the Corn Belt. We started getting invited to RFPs left and right. And all it took was one person picking up the phone, calling into the shippers, getting us on the list, working through that whole process. But we had a mousetrap that worked. And we had a team with all this experience that was already knocking it dead for one of the best in the industry. So you take that marquee customer, you go tell their biggest competitor, hey, Mr. Customer, I'm already working with Big Boy down the street. Do you have farmers out in these really small rural towns in Iowa that need deliveries? Well, I got these big corn-fed truck drivers that'll actually do a driver assist on the back. And they got the pallet jack that you need to get that stuff all the way back to the back so the farmer can get off with his John Deere and the forks. And so when you can have that level of detail of that conversation, the broker at Coyote and TQL, they're not saying that. They're saying, I got the best prices. Send me over your loads. And I'm calling in saying, hey, do you have any good thing going to Sherwood, Kansas this week? Because I got a truck. So that's where, you've really got to get your message refined, and you've got to make sure that you can deliver. Otherwise, it's not even worth it, right? And so it's not magic, and it's really not rocket science. It's understanding who you are, making sure that you're good at that, and going and approaching the market with confidence on a very specific message. And if you can do that, there's always a customer.
I love that.
Damn, that's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack there for sure.
You kind of just like rebuilt the engine when you got there. You like made it so that it's all systemized and organizationally like efficient. Okay. And then FitzMark came knocking, or how did that look like?
So my vision originally was to go out and get Manning's stable and then do some small acquisitions. I was inspired by Brad Jacobs and what he had done at XPO. And I thought to myself, like, I can do a tiny version of that. I don't need $1 billion outcome to change my life for the rest of my life. And that was really the initial strategy going out. And so as soon as I started to get that thing really humming and our sales engine was working, I thought, wow, we could do this. We could go take somebody else on. So I started doing some outbound, emailing, going to FMCSA, pulling broker lists out, sending out some cold emails, et cetera. And I think in probably November of 19, I got an email from Scott at FitzMark. And I'm like, this is exactly what I'm doing right now. So I kind of tongue in cheek sent him kind of like probably a cocky response back, which is not uncommon, by the way. Like I was getting that from brokers constantly. Like, oh, you want to buy me? You, I'll buy you. Like that's like the common broker response. And so that was kind of how Scott and I started. And then you fast forward to a few months later, I was in the market looking for acquisitions and had gone down to one of the investment conferences that happens early in the year down in Florida every year and sponsored by one of the investment bankers. And I was enticed to come down there, just look at a couple of deals. There was two that was really, really hot to trot on, had the investors excited about, and I want to go down there and meet the ownership group. And so I go down there, I have a fantastic meeting with one of them and I got stood up for the second one. So I'm kind of like irritated. I feel like, all right, I got beat to the punch. Somebody else is going to get this one, but whatever, I'll focus on the other one. So that night, at the bar, like you are at these freight conferences, and I get to talking to guys like, I'm Scott Fitzgerald. I'm like, hey, FitzMark, you sent me an email a while ago. He's like, yeah, that's right. And so we start talking. We never talked after we had that email exchange because Scott had to have like an emergency appendectomy or whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
So appendectomy is what that is. So I just asked him, how's that going? We start talking, and then he's like, man, why are you here? I said, I'm trying to buy a couple of these deals. He's like, ha, which one? And I was like, well, there's this group, and I'm trying to be coy and not give him the details. More or less lets me know. He's like, that guy didn't come talk to you because I have him under LOI. So I'm like, oh, okay. And then I got to talking to Scott, and he had already done a couple of deals, and he had a recipe down, and he was so much further along than I was. He had already built his own technology. So I was at this crossroads where I felt like we had really, really kind of like streamlined what we were doing there, and tech was starting to become a barrier. We were on Keypoint by DAT, which we had built some middleware applications on top of it that were allowing us to integrate with a bunch of other stuff. So we had that thing pretty well dialed in, but I was really like super impressed with what they're doing with Revenova at the time. And I was looking at really everything in the market, and I decided like, we need to go to Revenova now so that we can go acquire other brokers, because we're not on a platform right now that's going to allow us to go get the other brokerage excited about joining us, but something new and fresh would be. And Revenova is pretty new. So as I'm going through and I'm about to pull the trigger on Revenova, COVID had hit, and things had just gotten really, really like stressful in the world, right? And my investors were back in California, and they were a new kind of private equity shop. They were backed by some small family offices, and these two guys were awesome investors. And like, I never would have got the Mannings deal done like without these guys. I never would have had the outcome that I would have had if I didn't have these guys like brain power behind me. But it was stressful going through COVID with these guys that were in California, stuck in their home. Meanwhile, I'm living life in Nebraska. We're wide open, right? Like my kids are traveling. We're like, we're at the grocery store. Like nothing's changed. And, these guys are really stressed, and their other businesses are under fire and they're shut down, and they're thinking we need to cut back, and we need to like cut these people that have been with us for 15, 20 years. And they wanted me to jump back in the brokerage seat. Meanwhile, we're seeing record numbers, and I'm looking down the road going, no. Like we need to go higher. We need to attract people. Like this is it. Like this is going to be our path. And that just like over time, I wanted to keep the foot on the gas, and we were cash flow positive. We're making a ton of money, and I'm thinking like, we need to be reinvested in this. So we started to kind of come up to this crossroads where I saw this pandemic thing isn't going away. I'm probably not going to have the support of these guys to go out and fulfill my mission or continue to buy. Having fun running this brokerage in Omaha, but like for the people that know me the best, know that like I don't go to one office and sit there and do the same thing. Like that's just not what I've always been.
Sure.
And running a small, brokerage in Omaha, Nebraska, like didn't have me out on the road all the time. And so it just got to the point where I thought to myself, like, man, we got to do something with this group to see this thing get to where I know it could be. This group of people is really, really impressive. And this is a special, special thing that they built. And Ed Manning, who started this thing 50 years ago, is still alive. And like, I want to make sure this guy sees this thing get to safe harbor. And meanwhile, we could talk another day about what I think is going to happen to the small broker and how they're going to go the way of the dodo bird. And there's going to be probably 30 brokers at some point in the next, however many years. So I thought this is the chance. FitzMark was here. Scott had never let me stop thinking about selling to him. And then, as things kind of continued to just kind of be in a stalemate with the existing investors, Scott continued to call. And, he just really made a compelling case that like, look, man, this thing's going to continue to grow. Like you can roll a lot of your equity into this transaction. You can go do whatever you want. I mean, my original plan was to stick it out with them and, kind of be Scott's kind of COO, CRO type guy. But I just felt really good about it. I was just like, once I let my ego go and like my vision of what I wanted to do, I started thinking, well, what was right for the business, what was right for all the shareholders. It was such an obvious choice. So he made an offer that like I had to present. I had a fiduciary responsibility, whether I wanted to sell or not. I had to as CEO. And the offer was such that it was like the investors were like, we'd be fools not to take this. I said, let's do it. So
Nice.
Yeah.
Today's episode is also brought to you by Control Chain. Struggling to find loads? Control Chain offers a cost-effective solution for carriers to secure more freight contracts with reliable shippers. Sign up at controlchain.com and start receiving loads today.
And what month was that? In 2020?
That would have been
right?
October 2020.
2020. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was your first relatively sizable exit?
Yeah. I mean, that was my seventh exit career.
Oh,
I sold a couple Worldwide Express franchises, sold a couple of my two bootstrap
franchises,
companies.
yeah.
But yeah, that was the first time that like, if I wanted to take some time off, I probably could have done so. I was fortunate that same year to be able to sell a majority of my position in airspace. And so that was, kind of the only time in my life where I was able to kind of like take a look back and say, okay, like my family's happy in Omaha. I told my wife we can leave. She said, like, I understand if you have to go, but like just send us money because the boys and I are happy. And I thought it's not going to work. So, so I had to figure out something else to do in Nebraska. And I think COVID, like it was good timing because I loved what I did at Freight Mango and the group. I worked for this group called Man Capital out of Europe and super, super well-connected private equity group. And like my board was just like the most smart, amazing people. But while I was doing that, this opportunity came up with the Sade family at CMA CGM Group to build ZBox. And that was, just couldn't have been better suited for what I was doing at the time. During COVID, we had shut down really our operation of the brokerage. We had put 4 or 5 of the top people in the office. Everybody else had worked remotely. I'd gotten some good insight that COVID was coming because the Center for Infectious Disease is in Omaha. So a lot of the like top kind of experts about COVID in the world were in Omaha. And through my network, I'd been told about this Chinese virus that was happening like, early that winter.
It was like November, December.
I started hearing about this. Well, when my most successful friends in Omaha started pulling their money out of the market, then I was like, okay, I told my investors, like, guys, this is coming. And if people in Omaha are reacting this way, it's going to like shut everything down. So we were ahead of it. We already had monitors, keyboards, everybody was set up. So when that office shut down, I started going to the office at first, but then that made everybody at home feel like they needed to be in the office because Charley was in the office. So then I kind of like just started staying home and, staying home in a brokerage was like,
Sucks.
yeah, it sucked. I had nothing to do. So it was like, I'd try to do as many customer calls as I could to support the 2 sales guys that we had working at the time. But my kids knew like, hey, if we get homework done and dad's off his last call, like we're going fishing for the rest of the day or whatever the case was. So like a lot of people, we just adapted to it. But I would say like, going through that at that time gave me the perspective where I could step back and actually think like, I feel like if I was in the office every day and I was in the hunt, in the fight, I may not have taken the opportunity to merge with FitzMark. And in hindsight, that would have been a net negative because I look at like the productivity in that Omaha office and the productivity in that FitzMark organization and what they've done since we merged. It's like, it's a no-brainer. Scott is a broker's broker and the team that he has out there and the systems they built, like he just knows what he's doing. So it was a great move.
Awesome.
Charley, I do want to bring up something that you said earlier. You weren't expecting for private equity to come in the way it did. This was back like during your first venture that you were thinking this and I want to like hear your thoughts on it. Like private equity has come in quite aggressively into the brokerage space. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So, timing wise, I start in 2003, in that time it was like shipping or trucking, right? And then Amazon starts calling it logistics and then COVID starts calling it supply chain. And next thing you know, it's like this big sexy industry. But back in those days, it was pretty like nascent industry. Like it was just going on behind the scenes. Right. And, I didn't know anything about private equity. I was just some sales guy out in the field and then some sales manager operating a small business. And then, I happened to, work for the co-founder of Worldwide Express. He owned a bunch of franchises. He acquired the first franchise that I built so that I could run his businesses for him. So I ran this sizable chunk of Worldwide Express in Northern California at the time and managed all those franchises in that area. And when Roger, the co-founder, and my boss started talking about, hey, we might do a recapitalization, I had to go Google it. I didn't know what that meant. And then when it found out that, hey, they're bringing in some private equity guys, I realized like, wow, the owners are selling a big chunk of their business. Roger's feet are never going to touch the ground ever again. That's why he lives in the south of France. I'm running this company. This is a good deal for them. But I didn't know how that trickled down to me. I knew I had some equity in this little tiny franchise, but he was selling the franchisor, not the franchise. So I just didn't know that eventually they were going to go roll up all the individual franchises and all these franchisees were going to sell out for crazy multiples. And because when we were selling our franchises back then in worldwide days, it was like, 3 to 5x of your EBITDA, just standard small business kind of multiple. But that's not what those guys got that built big franchises, because once the franchisor got acquired and the franchisor had a bunch of money, they went out and they bought it a fair multiple because now they're trading it 20x, 30x, whatever they were trading. I don't know. But the reality is I never realized that there was so much arbitrage there where you can go buy at the small business level and then you can make money on that spread, which gives these guys like FitzMark incentive to come roll you up because that's how they go attract private equity money.
Oh, interesting.
So, knowing what I know now that like it all trickles down. And if you're running a profitable brokerage that's run well and healthy and has a good book of business and it doesn't have all these red flags on it financially that these private equity guys are looking for, someone will come roll you up, put you right in their portfolio, and they'll buy you at 4x because they're going to go raise their next round at 8 or 12x. So they make money on that arbitrage right there. So once I understood that, I realized like any business in logistics gets to a certain scale, it has an acquirer. But back when I was running Worldwide Express franchises, before private equity came in, there was this problem where you could build a franchise so big that nobody could acquire you because there was nobody out there big enough to come acquire you. So like the bigger you got, the narrower pool of buyers that you had. But somewhere around that 2005, 2007 mark, you started to see these guys come in a meaningful way and they love third-party logistics. So that's why all of these guys, GlobalTranz, Command, Coyote, they all, Worldwide, Unishippers, once private equity comes in, Nolan Transportation Group, Transportation Insight, then the private equity guys have to start to pull the strings behind the scenes to create those arbitrage events. So they have to merge these two things together because if you're trading at 12 and he's trading at 12 and we put you together, that's the definition of 1 + 1 = 3, right?
Sure.
And so that is the part that, the untrained eye can't see when you're out in the field and you're just working on your business.
So let's touch on your earlier comment that you said a little bit, a forward-looking statement that you think that in a couple of years, whatever that may be, that we'll see a total of 30 brokers.
Consolidation of the industry.
Which
is interesting
because it's just on the same topic that you're talking about right now.
Yeah.
It's acquiring, repackaging, putting it all into one.
And it's something that I feel like has been talked about for like almost a decade now. And I know like Andrew Silver, when I interviewed him before, he told me that before starting Molo, his dad was like saying like he believes that there's gonna be a lot of consolidation in the industry moving forward. And like he wasn't like so sure if like Molo is the right decision to build. And what we've seen during the pandemic happen, a lot of brokerages open. A lot of brokers. There's more brokerages now
for sure
than ever existed.
Yeah.
So curious as to why, Charlie, do you believe there will be like a consolidation event?
So it comes down to economies of scale. And now having, a couple decades of perspective and really spending the last like 4 or 5 years of watching how these companies grow and evolve and what the potential outcomes are, there's a couple of outcomes, right? And if you want to create a lifestyle business and you want to manage, your brother-in-law's account and then a half a dozen other shippers that through your kid's little league team and shit like that, and you want to run it all through your house, that guy he'll be an agent for somebody else and he'll be his own broker for a long time, right? But what I'm talking about is that guy that goes out and you leave Coyote, you leave Command, you leave wherever you leave, and then you go out and you swindle your biggest shipper, you get one other guy, or, you got the shipper on the back burner, you don't bring him on at your current shop, you wait till you go bring him over here. However you get that first one, right? That first, like you think you're going into business for yourself and you're going to work for yourself. But the first time you get a shipper, now you got a boss and now you're working for them as a broker, especially as a one-man band. And then what you realize is like, golly, the problem you had, Oh, I got to pay 50% up front. Oof. Do you take credit card? Oh, yeah. I don't know how I'm going to do this. Wait, let me call my customer, see if they can ACH me real quick. And then next thing you know, you're not like scaling your business, like you're running your business. And it's really, really hard. And then you can do that through just muscle and effort, right? And then what does that broker do? He goes out and hires his buddy or his brother or whoever's closer to him that will start building his loads for him. And like scaling through that methodology and using your own capital is just extremely difficult, right? So you could do it. You could build a lifestyle business. Once you get there, it's comfortable, but you're still taking calls.
So how does that lead and end up leading to?
I think he's going to get.
Yeah, that's already good.
Yeah.
The other outcome that you could be looking for is like you could go and you could get some outside capital, and like Andrew did with Molo, and you could go scale. And you could say, hey, look, we know the playbook. We're going to go get some shipper salespeople. We're going to go get some loads. Then we're going to go to carrier sales team. We're going to get some carriers. We're going to start, taking transactions day one. And we have external capital. So we're going to fund that balance through our balance sheet. We're going to fund this growth and we're going to lose money for a period of time. But when we turn the corner and we get to 5% profitability, we're going to be at such a large scale that we're going to be making money. The problem with both of those outcomes is they're going to become tougher and tougher to acquire, because as more and more of these big freight companies become profitable and go public, they're scrutinized in a different way. And they don't have to be publicly traded to be scrutinized. But that 5% brokerage that a lot of people were building like pre-COVID, during COVID, where, hey, we're going to go out and get market share and then we're going to work our way down to profitability. Anybody who's ever tried that in brokerage knows how hard it is to go out, acquire cheap freight, and then buy down your costs with your carrier. You have to be at a crazy big scale. So I heard Jeff Silver throw out the number one time, and I heard this on Andrew's podcast. Jeff Silver said one time that it's about 3,500 loads a day is what you need at scale to be able to use your own data to like manufacture profits, to where you can start to predict where the truck's going to be, and you can start to make matches, and you can start to do lower your cost to serve through technology in a way that's actually going to be meaningful to your bottom line. So that 5% brokerage, we've already proven it's not going to go to 11% just by administration. So nobody's going to come along. CH can't come by you at 5%. And we just saw how many brokerages hit the block this summer and early this year that didn't make it. Transfix ended up like selling their brokerage operation and spinning off the technology department, right? Convoy didn't make it through like at all. So what I'm seeing is these tech-enabled brokerages that never figured out how to go out and acquire profitable freight the right way still couldn't create the outcome for themselves that they were looking to, that was going to create a sale or a transaction or an event. Could not. It could not create the event that was going to satisfy the investors to back the next one.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've talked to anybody out there right now that's trying to raise money for a digital brokerage, I'd be shocked because nobody's trying to raise money.
Yeah, I was about to say,
that ship has sailed. That bad. The ship has sailed. So it all comes back to the fact that the people that tried to go scale and at 5% and then build their way into profitability were unsuccessful in doing so. So that's not going to create a big exit. So you're not going to get anybody to back you on that endeavor now. And the other outcome of building up to $10 or $12 million on your own, like that presents a very long arc, because now you've got 2, 3, 4 years, maybe a year to get to 10, 12 million bucks. Now you've got enough free cash flow coming in at over $1 million a year, hopefully, if you've got a good margin. Now you've got enough free cash flow to start to build an organization behind that owner. And if they hire well and they invest well in technology, you can slow growth, but you're going to keep it small and you're going to keep it all. And so where I'm going with this is to get acquired by a player that's going to get acquired and make it. You got to be 100 million, 200 million, 300 million. And that's a long slog if you're bootstrapping it. And it's a fast path if you have capital, but neither one of those things is like going to create this really binary outcome in 2 to 5 years that's going to excite the venture markets. So the only like realistic outcome is that the small and mid-sized broker, as these owners age out, because you're already seeing like baby boomer brokers. I see it all the time in my business right now at Upwell, where we're selling into, we have one product that we sell to the small and mid-sized broker, and then we have a suite of products that we sell to the enterprise. And in many cases, I'm finding out people like the son either bought the business from the dad, or the son's working in the business on the way to transition it out. But there's a lot of people in their 50s that have been booking freight for 20 years. And that's like, I mean, the bags under their eyes, the like, the despair in their voice. Like, you can't do this job forever. So eventually you have to sell it or you have to turn it over to somebody else. And if you continue to play that cycle forward, these little guys just don't have a bunch of outcomes. Like, you guys are sitting here starting a tech company. Like, you know brokerage better than anybody. You're not out shopping around for a $12 million a year brokerage that some guy wants to sell for $6 million because this is his only chance. So, and he might want $8 million. He might have some unrealistic expectation. So it's hard to buy and sell those little ones. It's easy to sell the big ones, but there's not many of them out there. So these little guys are either going to have to figure out how to get big, or they're going to get creative and merge up, and then they can get acquired. But the economies of scale say that that TQL and CH Robinson are just going to continue to figure out how to book freight for less and how to control drivers and keep them in their captive audience. And it's going to get harder and harder for the small guy. And the last point that I'll make is, I think with all this focus on carrier fraud and carrier compliance, it's going to get harder and harder for a broker to keep a captive audience on his small carriers that are out there, because there's so much scrutiny on these small carriers. And like that back pocket carrier that broker has that hauls exclusively for that broker, when that carrier doesn't pass compliance because the shipper's now screening the carrier, they don't trust the broker 100%. The shipper is now taking on themselves to screen the carrier. I think that's going to make it harder for the small broker too, because what value is that small broker bringing if he doesn't have that back pocket carrier, that dark capacity that nobody else can see?
Do you like that trend?
It doesn't matter if I like it or not.
Yeah. I mean, I know it doesn't matter, but what it is.
I think it just has to go that way because, shippers are going to continue to find ways to get more and more information and transparency about, what's going on inside the supply chain. And if we continue to see nuclear verdicts and, brokers drug into lawsuits and everything else, then brokers are going to have no other choice but to continue to distance themselves from being the one who directed that truck to be in that point at that time. So I think it just has to go that way, like whether we like it or not.
What do you think about the counter argument to this, which is why I kind of wanted to delve into this conversation, which is around like how the new adoption of certain technology, which is making a broker, especially a small one, let's say, even more efficient, right? It's less OpEx. There's fewer, let's say, to start a brokerage, maybe in the next 5 years, you'll need maybe not as many people to get to the same level that you currently do right now. Is that going to be a pushback against that consolidation trend? Do you see?
It'll be cheaper to start a brokerage, and then you could partner with companies to provide that cash flow.
Yeah, because I'm battling like with which way things are going to go too. I totally, it's a great point and observation that you have, which is like it's all going to consolidate to the bigger ones. But then there's also these market forces, very recent market forces that are also kind of seemingly pushing it back to like maybe there's a lot more smaller ones, right? And there's some market share that's taken away from the bigger ones. It's hard for me to see like which way.
I think we're going to continue to see like the division where the big continue to get bigger and they consolidate the middle guys, and the small just kind of stay. I think you have a turnstile at that small brokerage where think about a brokerage is like there's low barriers to entry, so you could start it up pretty easily, but you can wind it down just as easily, right? So there's people that don't have a exit plan for the brokerage. They just stop brokering freight one day, and so that happens, I think, at the very, very small side of that long tail. So I think my total view on this is like, if you really back up, you see that the TMS brought everything online and got everything digitized. And then you started to see these point solutions come out, which is the unbundling of the TMS. So the broker TMS serves certain functions, right? Where there's for the broker itself. That's where they're going to plan, execute. That's where they're going to go look for carrier capacity. They're going to go look for pricing inspiration and, kind of pricing data to make their pricing decisions. But as you start to see that that the purpose that broker serves in the TMS, those functions are now being unbundled. So there's pricing intelligence platforms out there that are now not just available to the broker, but they're also available to the shipper, and the carrier can ingest that data if they want.
Carrier sourcing platforms too.
Carrier sourcing platforms. So carrier discovery. So where the carriers are and how much to pay them, that used to be the information asymmetry that made brokerage what it was and allowed brokers to make outsized margins when the market would fluctuate. So I think the transparency is going to like take the sharks out of the margins. It's going to normalize transactions. You're already hearing this. Big companies like NFI, when their president Dave Browning was on Andrew's podcast, the Freight Pod recently, and he said, "Look, like we try to keep our margins pretty fixed, in the good and the bad. Like we don't want our customers like thinking that we're getting fat when times are good. Like you can't do it anymore because there's somebody else coming out there right behind you that's giving them an alternative price that they're going to look at, and if you keep doing it, they're going to go that way." So I think in absence of that information asymmetry, the broker who is really adding value to the shipper and becoming like a really trusted part of the supply chain for that mid-sized company that gives them that freight that doesn't fit in the box all the time, I think that'll be there on a relationship level, but I don't think they'll be there that stable carrier or that stable portfolio of, a bunch of small brokers that shipper is working with, because I just don't think that 10 years from now, I think even with AI, I don't think there's going to be a lot of people that want to go out there and aim to build a $10 million brokerage and keep it at $10 million and run it with 5 people on AI. I don't think that's going to be happening as much because I think it's going to be harder to do, honestly. I think
it's harder from which sense?
It's going to be harder to get the shippers to use you. That's what I think.
Because they will have alternate options.
I think the big brokers are already so far ahead with the capacity. And as they continue to refine the delivery of that capacity and how they make their matches, I just don't see the value that small brokerages are going to add. Because I think.
What about pricing wise? Like what if a smaller broker comes in and maybe is willing to take a little bit less? I guess I could see your point, which is like they're not going to make as much money, even if they undercut. Like
I want to be clear that I think there will always be room for the small broker that's managing the relational freight, that's managing the transactions or the people that trust them. I don't think we're going to see as many small brokers scale to $1 billion stories that we've seen. Like there's a lot of companies here in Chicago that didn't go raise external capital, that did it the hard way, the slow way over the last 20 years and reached $1 billion in gross marketplace value. Like I think there's a lot of folks out there that maybe not a lot, but there's a list out there and I can name a bunch of them. I think the guys that started 20 years ago and got to that level now, the Scott Fitzgeralds, the FitzMarks, the Jim Beckers of the world, like that didn't go out there and raise a bunch of money, that built it slow, the hard way. I think that's going to be harder to do.
Find shippers fast with ShipperCRM.com. ShipperCRM is a FreightCaviar product, and it is the first U.S. shipper database and freight CRM. Stop wasting time searching for shippers. ShipperCRM is the fastest way to find the shippers you should be working with. Supercharge your sales process with ShipperCRM. Learn more by going to ShipperCRM.com.
That's where I'm going.
Well, hasn't it been really hard anyway for like the Jim Becker and the Scott?
I don't want to take anything away from those guys and say that it wasn't hard. I'm just saying it was possible then.
Okay. And there was less competition back then.
I think, yeah, because like to your point, there's been how many brokers have started up?
Yeah.
Every single broker has, some sort of technology now. And I think it's going to be harder and harder and harder to differentiate as that small broker. And, I say that as spending a lot of time in my career at a small broker and calling in and trying to differentiate yourself. And I started hearing it 10 years ago when shippers were saying, man, I get calls from 10 guys like you a day. And so as you add more and more of those calls, I think these big brokerages now, I mean, Coyote's been around for how long?
Long time.
20 years?
20 years. That's a trusted name, right? Like TQL and Landstar, people say all that they want in the memes about them, but somebody trusts them. I mean, these are huge companies. So to me, when I think about like those companies were not that big 20, 25 years ago. And you look at how big they are now, they're not going to grow organically to get there, right? They're not going to just continue and just call into new customers and win market share at that level. Mm-hmm. And when you look at like the headlines just today, there was another brokerage in Tennessee that shut down. I forgot the name of it, but
Universal
Universal Holdings, Universal Transit. Yeah, that's right. But I mean, that's a reputable company, right? And they're owned like by Universal Holdings. I don't know much about the history or the ownership of that company or anything, but I know they've been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And they're finding it hard to survive. And their ownership group finally just said, look,
they let go of 150 people.
Yeah, get rid of the brokerage. We're done. So I think when you see examples of that, you realize these brokerages, they're not like, it's not a golden ticket. It's not a guarantee. It's not a money printing machine. So you have to do everything right. And if that company just shut down, they couldn't get acquired, again, I don't know anything about that company, but I just want to use that as a recent example that these things can go away too. And every company has at some point faced this like existential moment where, the owner's ready to go and they want to get out of it and they have to find a buyer, or they face a crisis and they can't get through it on their own and they need somebody to come in and take them over and help. And if you can't do that, you end up on FreightWaves.
So would your, and I'm just curious, would your opinion be different if we were not in a down market, or let's say, I guess it's a flat market right now, but like if we were on an upward trend market, we saw in the 2022 cycle, tons of brokerages opened up, got into the space, and now a lot of them are shutting down, right? Like that's the trend that we're seeing. What if we were in an up market right now? Like would your stance be the same? I'd imagine it's probably the same, but it might be harder probably to see the point that you're making, which I think is a valid one.
I think my point would be the same. Like, this is like the third really bad cycle I've been through in my career from a freight perspective and an economic cycle. And I honestly feel like I have like this natural optimism about me where I don't really feel it, When I started my first brokerage, I remember like talking to this guy and became my mentor. It's like, man, your business is going so well. Imagine what it's going to be like when freight turns around. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I don't even know what he's talking about. Because to me, I'm just fighting for freight every day anyways.
Yeah.
So I do think my perspective would be largely the same. And I want to just be really clear right now. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying that there's not some guy right now that's starting a brokerage that's going to go out and just crush it and like prove everybody wrong that somebody can do it.
It's going to be harder.
I just think it's going to be hard. And I think there was a golden age of brokerage.
Oh, totally.
And you see a lot of these guys. One guy who has been super successful here in Chicago, I didn't just bring up in this same breath as like Will Kerr from Edge. There was a lot of companies like in that vintage that came around and they really crushed it. And I don't think from this crop of brokers that are starting up now, I don't think we're going to see that. I don't think there's an arrive in the batch, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And look, I mean,
but do you think that there might still be a lot of the 10 million, 12 million a year type brokerages, but it's just getting beyond that, we'll see fewer that go, rocket.
Yeah. And I don't know if the number's 10,
Yeah.
The number might be somewhere in there, but yeah, I think that, the guys that go from 100 to 500 to 1 billion, like there's been a lot of folks on that arc over the last 10 years. And I think that one's going to get harder and harder.
Yeah, because then you're competing with the ones that did establish themselves to be big right now.
And don't get me wrong, there's not many Matt Pyatts out in the world, right? There's not many Andrew Silvers out in the world. There's not many people that have that ambition. I haven't talked to Matt in a while, but I was with some other founders in Chicago a couple of weeks ago, and so he told me like he's holding out for a $5 billion valuation. Like that's what that guy's aiming for. Not a lot of brokers wake up in the morning thinking about building something that big. So there's some unique humans out there that can prove everybody wrong. There's some outliers.
Sure. I love this conversation, by the way. This is awesome, Charlie. Can you take us now through ZBox and then what you're currently working on and tell us, like, I feel like this whole conversation has been kind of taking us that way where, like, the back office stuff that you've been mentioning. So can you just take us through, like, ZBox and then your transition into Upwell?
Sure. So a couple of years ago, I mentioned I was spending a lot of time at home during COVID. I was doing a bunch of angel investing, messing around with Robinhood. And I spent a lot of time talking to VCs at that time because I was looking at all these angel deals and spending just a lot of time in and around that world. And, in the back of my mind, I was probably thinking, what am I starting next? And in addition to doing some direct angel investing on my own, I was working with a guy who's become a dear friend, who's now a great investor at Primary Ventures named Zach Fredericks formerly from LoadSmart. And he and I partnered up and we were matching early stage startups with well-known angels that were specifically suited for their projects. So we called it the Supply Chain Collective. And we, as an example, we did an investment into Solvento,
South American.
Yeah, they're the Latin American freight factoring company. And we did an investment in Solvento and we brought in some really well-known trucking executives from North America that had acute knowledge of the factoring markets that have been really additive. So we would bring in these really high-power angels and get them on the cap table of these early-stage startups. So that was a lot of fun. And so Zach and I, in the back of our minds, were kind of thinking about raising a fund. And then, but he was still, very hard at work at LoadSmart. And I started thinking to myself that, hey, if I were to get into the right situation, within a couple of years, I could go out and raise a sizable fund and get money to go invest in these early stage startups. I've done 36 direct investments now, but at that time I'd probably done 15 or 20. So I was thinking to myself, like,
6 investments. Wow.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
So I started thinking to myself, very small, very small. I'm not a wealthy guy, but I do like to be involved, and I like to support my friends and smart people. And so as I was doing that and thinking about raising a fund, this opportunity came along to build ZBox. And so first off, working with the Sade family at the CMA CGM group, there's only 2 or 3 of those companies in the world that are at that scale. And, that group just had like a tremendous reputation for operational excellence. And, there's a lot of people that would, here in America, that would poke fun at making or at working with the French people. And it's definitely a unique culture. But I can honestly say that I learned more in that 2 years of working that business than I could have doing anything else, because it got me not only inside the 4 walls of CMA CGM Group and Siva Logistics, their logistics company, but they also walked me into all of their largest trade partners in North America and allowed me to give the presentation of what ultimately became ZBox, which is this community of large corporates that are partnering up to drive innovation in the supply chain. So the idea wasn't for us to go out and, help BNSF find a tool that could automate some element of their customer service. That was important. They needed that. But really what we spent a lot of time doing is bringing in multiple companies, multiple stakeholders from that container shipping ethos. And we would get them all around the table, and we'd have the customer service group from CMA and BNSF. And we'd start to look at the data, and we'd see, tens of thousands of calls and emails between these two groups that are happening on a weekly basis. And we start to look at the nature of those communications and how can we systematize some of these things? How can we create deeper integrations? And then once you can kind of get down to the core of that problem and see it in its most simple form and describe it in one sentence, then it's easy to go find a startup that wants to come in and help solve that problem. And so for me at that time in my life, where I was spending all my time sitting on boards, advising startups, angel investing, to be able to go do that and get paid to do it full time and travel around the world and have a budget to host events and get out in front of all these founders and all these big corporates, I mean, it was an awesome experience. It was more fun, I think, than you can have professionally. But really what it did is it gave me the opportunity to sit down with these big companies and see how they buy and how they think. And I had tried to sell to a lot of large corporates as a founder and a small business owner. And I was unsuccessful way more than I was successful. And then at ZBox, I actually got to sit on the other side of the room or the other side of the Zoom call and see like what happens in these big companies when a good idea is put in front of them and everybody agrees that there's potential there.
What was the biggest learning?
There was a lot. Number one, like human behavior is weird, but like, you learn at a young age that like people in power, like work really hard to like sustain their own power. And these fiefdoms that exist in every area of life, like they exist in big companies, like more than ever and more than anything. And so what I found is that it's not necessarily like the quality of the idea. It's like, the timing and the buildup of the like problem before the idea is presented. And then I also found that like, really, it's like stamina. It comes down to stamina from the startup side, because we take it personally as startups. We're like, they said they'd get back to me by Friday. They had a meeting on Thursday. He was going to present my thing. And then, when I got to sit in on those meetings, I realized like that little piddly startup issue that person wanted to bring forward didn't even get up. It didn't even get brought and put on the table. And if it did, it was, buried underneath all these other big items. Or if it was, maybe it was well received and we had all the right people around the table. But the startup and the corporate partners are saying, hey, this sounds great. Let us circle up and we'll come back to you. Well, nobody ever circles up after that, because like everybody hangs up one Zoom call and goes to the next Teams call. And then like there's no follow-up that happens from there. So what I learned at ZBox was like, we got to be that intermediary, and we got to remind that large corporate, hey, you guys are paying us to bring you these ideas. Remember that idea was a good one. And I think just having that like constant pulse of communication from like a third party was beneficial to our startup partners and got some technology out in the hands of the corporates. But I think more importantly, it just showed me as a founder that like, if you want to sell to a big guy, number one, have your product ready. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it's got to be ready. Corporates are not going to blur their eyes and see where you're going. They want to see what this does for me today. And if it doesn't solve their problem today, they don't want to be your design partner. Like a VP of a big corporation is not here to help you build your dream. He's got a lot of stuff to do. She's got work all over the world, and they're not here to hold your hand. But when you're ready for showtime, you have to have a clear value proposition. If your value proposition is not spelled out on your presentation, don't send the presentation. Because in these big companies, if those words are not on the slide, they don't exist. People in big companies communicate way differently than in small companies. Small companies is all about vibe and conversation and relationship and taking the time to understand. In big companies, it's like, oh, send it over. I'll take a look at it. If it's interesting, I'll send it around to some people. I'll let you know. So, you have to really have your material and your collateral buttoned up and crisp and sharp. Otherwise, it's just not going to pass muster.
Yeah.
So it really comes down to communication, and it comes down to stamina. And so if you could have your messaging tight and you can get the right people around the table and you just don't give up, you'll get deals.
I love that. It's good insight knowledge from you, Charlie.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. And like, how that kind of, dovetails into Z-Boxes. I got involved in Z-Box thinking, hey, these guys are going to let me go around the world and meet all the startups and meet all the VCs. And they're going to get me in front of all these people that could ultimately become LPs in my fund. And this seems like the right platform for me to kind of get to the next phase. And when I got involved, Z-Box has its own corporate venture arm, and a lot of our corporate partners were involved in corporate venture. And I spent all my time talking to VCs and networking with VCs and, talking to founders. And I found out really quickly that running the accelerator and providing the programming and doing all the coordination and stuff like that wasn't what got me excited. What got me excited was getting out in the field and listening to the problems, and then coming back and putting the ideas in front of them, and then talking to the founder and getting them excited about the potential of what this arrangement could look like. And then when those big deals came through, I'd get really inspired. And so that coupled with the fact that then I had to sit on a corporate investment committee, and I had to have all this governance and investing. And really when you're investing, you're actually saying no, 99% of the time. But when I was angel investing, I just want to say hell yes. If I like the founder and it was a big space and a good idea, I'm writing a small check and I'm on your team and we're working together now. But it doesn't work that way when you're investing other people's money. And I realized quickly that and I was also doing that supply chain collective with Zach. And I realized I love getting these LPs and these angels really excited about what we're doing. I don't like calling them and sending them the documents and making sure they wire the money and reminding them 27 times and all the other stuff that makes me admire VCs, because they spend most of their time raising money, not giving it to startups and working with startups. And so I found out quickly, I don't want to be in corporate venture. Corporate innovation was really fun. I love doing it, but I also knew I wasn't going to last in this global corporation for 20 years, right? I wasn't going to fly back and forth to France 4 times a year. It was great for me. It was the right fit at the time, but about a year in, it was obvious, there's so many problems that are still being unsolved. And I knew that I could put a team around one of them, and order to cash automation to me was super, super important. And so, quick story, going back to when I was running my bootstrap brokerage, I had just gotten involved with Cargomatic, and I had told my wife, look, I wanted to do Uberized trucking. I was trying to figure out how to Uberize trucking. And a friend of mine, the co-founder of Cargomatic, Brett Parker, called me one day and he said, look, we need to go to market, guy. We just came up with this app. I'm like Uber? He's like, yeah, it's just like Uber. I was like, I love Uber. So I drove up the next day to LA and I saw what they had built, and I jumped in feet first, at first as a consultant, then I became employee number 1 at Cargomatic. And so I was spending all my time in LA, building this startup, and my wife was running the companies back home. And she told me one day on a Monday, hey, we're low on cash. We have payroll Thursday. You got to do something here. So I'm like, oh, whatever. It'll be fine. It's Monday. I'm like, you get money.
We've partnered with Ascend TMS, the world's most popular and top-rated transportation management system. You could use our referral code RA-FreightCaviar ! To receive 3 months of Ascend TMS for free. You can click the link below to learn more.
Tell me Tuesday, we didn't get any money. I'm like, all right. So Tuesday I call, the receive, I call our accountant person who was just similar. She also is the person that would run the office and, answer customer calls, just that person, right? Hey, pull me a receivables report. Well, the receivables report is really hard to pull in most TMSs because it has to be synced with your daily payments. It's not synced with your QuickBooks. It's just a pain in the ass. So it took her a day, and I finally get the receivable report on Wednesday, and I'm like, why do all these customers owe us money? And then I'd start calling around to customers. I'd be like, I don't even have that invoice, or, hey, you sent me this invoice and it doesn't have a bill of lading on it. So next thing you know, like I'm in complete despair because I'm like, I need, call it $10,000 to make payroll on Thursday. And, all these customers owe me money, but none of them can wire it to me today because all of them need something from me. So we had to correct the invoices and go back to the thing. And so on Thursday, I had to drive back down from LA to San Diego. And I just bought this Mercedes that I found. It was like I had a Honda Pilot was my dad car, and my wife had a Honda Odyssey. I found this sweet little Mercedes C230 that was cherry. It's an old man had it in his garage. It was low mileage. So I bought that thing, and I was driving that to and from LA. It was like my only coolness in my dad life at this point. And I had to sell that thing on Craigslist for $10,000 cash that day and take the cash to the bank to make payroll the next day. And I get it in front of my whole team. And it was because my cash was tied up in all these receivables. And I thought to myself that day, dude, I can send an email campaign out of Constant Contact and it'll pepper somebody as long as I want them to. But if they're past due on their balance with me, my person has to send them 20 emails manually. And I would always get pissed when people were behind and then they would say they never got the invoice. I'm like, well, didn't you get our statement this week? And they'd be like, no, we didn't get a statement. And they'd be like, hey, why didn't we send out statements? I'm like, because it's all manual, it's all work, So the long and short, I had this idea years ago that hey, there should be automation that syncs up with my TMS and communicates with my customers. And why can't my customers pay online? And if you've ever tried to set up a credit card account as a broker to take payments, it's damn near impossible. Mm-hmm. So as I felt all of these pains along the way on the workflow side, I just always knew that was there. But like every other, customer facing person in the world, I thought tracking and visibility and pricing was cool, But then when I saw HubTran, when I bought HubTran when I was running Manning's, and I saw these documents up in the cloud for the first time, I'm like, damn, those are the same documents that I got to take and I got to put them up in the cloud so that my shippers will pay me. Mm-hmm. And I used to think to myself, why don't they just take that and put it up into RXO's site so that RXO automatically releases my payment? And so, over the years, I just have all these ideas, why doesn't it just work this way? And then one of the first angel investments I did when I moved to Nebraska was Basic Block. And they, you guys know Taylor. Mm-hmm. Taylor has just become one of my best friends in the world and somebody I admire so much. But he, through working with Taylor and eventually taking a role on his board, I got to just study the flow of funds in trucking. And by operating a brokerage, I got to see the money in and out. And by getting close to Basic Block, I'm close to these drivers and I know how dependent they are on cash. And really it's just obvious that when you zoom out, the pattern recognition that all these problems exist in all these different parts of brokerage and trucking. So I just knew that, right? And I just knew it and it was inherent to me, but nobody was building anything to fix it. Then you fast forward, I'm running ZBox and I see, wow, all these big companies have the same problem. And when I dig in on it, hey, why did these guys say you owe them $15 million? What's this all about? Well, they haven't invoiced us in a month and these ones are missing bill of lading numbers and this one doesn't have a reference. So then when I hear that from these big companies, I'm like, holy shit, this is a huge problem. So I start researching it because at ZBox, the number one category that we were making progress in was workflow automation. And it was software that would take documents or data from one place and put it in another place, really specific point solutions. But we were selling big contracts for our startups to these big corporates, particularly around AP automation. And so accounts payable automation is the process of ingesting invoices and doing some validation on those invoices to make sure that they're okay to pay. And using OCR technology and now AI to do that. So that's been pervasive. It's moved along for the last 10 years. Well, 10 years ago when HubTran came out, everybody called it documents in freight, right? But in other industries, that would be considered AP automation because you're taking the documents that need to be paid and associated to those payments and you're automating that process, right? So as AP automation continued to make progress and the shippers were using AP automation, I saw that nobody in transportation had that same level of technology to match their audit on their side. And whether you're using technology to audit your invoices like Coupa or Open Envoy or one of these products, or you're using a freight audit company that's looking at your invoices and verifying their payment status, everybody was making you put your invoices somewhere. It wasn't like the old days of brokerage where you'd email over the invoice and Gladys would call you and be like, hey, Paul, you forgot the reference number again. I'm going to pay you this time, but next time I'm going to ding you, Now you're putting your stuff up in a queue. You might as well call the Pentagon. Nobody's going to look at that for days, right? And if you don't go back and check and see that thing was rejected, you're just not going to know about it until it was due. And if that's a net 90 customer that you paid the carrier at 15, and now that customer's invoice is past due at 110 and you're calling them, they're like, oh no, it's missing a reference number. You got to reprocess that invoice. Well, now you're going to get paid at day 200, right? And that negative cash flow that creates, people fund that in a number of different ways. Big companies fund it with their balance sheet. They stay overcapitalized. Other companies go get sophisticated debt mechanisms. These big brokerages that we keep talking about, these billion-dollar players, they're going to the biggest banks out there in the industry and they're getting asset-based lines of credit and they're drawing against it and they have free cash flow. They're just moving around. They pay a fee for it, but they have access to it, right? Mm-hmm. And this goes back to why it's so hard to scale a $10, $12 million brokerage. When you need $2 million in working capital to go take on a big customer, how do you get that as a small broker? Your credit card has a $50K limit on it.
Yeah.
Do you know how to go get $2 million in debt? I didn't. When I'd walk into my credit union and the guy would be like, hey, do you want a line of credit? I'd be like, I don't think I'll get approved, but that's how we all work as a brokerage. But these big guys get their working capital figured out, and so how that all, sort of translates back to this order to cash automation, opportunity is I just started seeing that people needed some tooling there. And then I started going out and looking in the industry and figuring out like, hey, who's working on this? First, I looked at the startup landscape. And internationally, there was a couple of folks that are doing billing or, some sort of like minor version of this for logistics, but nothing in earnest. And then I started looking at the American market and seeing, at the high end of the market, there's very large companies like BillTrust, VersaPay, HighRadius that, these are pre-IPO, post-IPO companies that have built massive business in the last 15 years, building, autonomous finance or order to cash for large companies. But none of them really had a presence in logistics. So then I start getting really excited. This is probably September of 22. And now I'm like waking up in the middle of the night thinking like, dude, somebody's going to build air automation for logistics. And if it's not me, I'm going to be so pissed. But by this time, guys, think about it. I've spent 20 years looking at the problems in this space. And I've predicted things that have come out that were successful. And some of them, like Cargomatic, I got involved with and I made an angel bet in and I benefited from minorly, but I didn't take the leap. I didn't start that on my own, right? So when this started to bubble up and I started to size the market and I saw that order to cash was a segment on Gartner, and I thought that like we're in one of the biggest industries in the world and nobody's coming after it. And I knew in my head why. I knew why nobody wanted to go after this. It's because every shipper has their own requirements and everybody wants to be invoiced slightly differently than the next person. And all of those requirements right now are up in somebody's head, or they're in a Google Doc or a Word doc or in a folder and it's some SOP. But like, if your main billing person is out one week, and that backup comes in and invoices your customer, like you're probably not getting paid for all those bills. Like,
so are you going shipper by shipper and integrating with their billing requirements?
So yeah, what we're doing is we're building the world's largest library and catalog of shipper invoice requirements. So Upwell is built on the most sophisticated rules engine out there, where we sit between the transportation management software, the accounting software, and your accounting email. That's the sort of the triangle of truth and where we get all the data. If you're using a document platform like HubTrain or Transflow, we can integrate with that. We can read the documents. We can also read the documents directly. Documents aren't the hard part anymore. With large language models and AI, like the documents have been solved. The key is we're not just focused on telling you what's on the document and then letting you do something with it. We want to get that document directly where it goes. And more importantly, we want to tell you when it's the wrong document. So as an example, one of our first customers that came on board, they were working with one of the largest retailers in North America who requires on every order, a purchase order number, SKU counts, SKU numbers, a unique stamp, and the stamp has to have a signature. And that shipper likes to be invoiced using Breakthrough Fuel. And currently there's one human in that company, and that's not a low-paid human. She's not fresh to the organization. This is like the keeper of all the secrets. This is the person you can trust when your biggest customer is pissed off about their invoices. So for months, she had been going through every single invoice for this massive retailer and verifying the reference, verifying the SKU count, verifying the stamp, verifying the signature. She's doing this all manually. So that was the first customer they onboard. We basically take all of their invoicing requirements. This is a no-code integration. That particular broker starts forwarding the shipper invoices directly out of the TMS. They don't go to the shipper, they go to us. We ingest all the data via that email. We then send the EDI invoice over to the shipper's SAP. instance, we upload the backup documentation to their bank's portal, and we notify them via email with a hard copy of the invoice all at the same time. And we also sit up in that bank portal's notification center and let our customer know if that order has been rejected or approved. So getting that invoice to the customer is not what matters. It's knowing that the customer has it and that they're going to pay. That's the peace of mind that people pay us for.
And that you're compliant with all their requirements.
Exactly.
Very interesting. So what was the tagline again? The world's largest directory of
per invoice requirements?
Yeah.
Per invoice?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it, not a tagline. That's just, I guess, you just tagged it that, I guess. But
well, you said it first, but I was like, wait, that was pretty cool. Like world's largest, what was it?
We're like library of shipper invoice requirements. Cool. So, at first, the first couple of customers, we onboard them, we show them how to configure all this stuff in the end. And then, now we're integrated with a few of the major TMSs, and we have an open API that customers can integrate to. So when that integration is established, then all of the customer data and the transaction data, shipment data, it's all ingested, all their history is ingested into Upwell. And if that shipper's requirements are already on file in Upwell, our client could just associate that shipper to the shipper in their record. And we already have those requirements on file. Right? So most of the major retailers, and the big folks, we're already invoicing for.
That's cool. Very cool. Charley, so we have to slowly start wrapping things up here. I do have a family event to get to in the suburbs. Curious how it's been building out Upwell, and what is like your future vision for it? Like, what are you working on right now? Like, that's most important. Can you take us through that?
So building Upwell has been the biggest joy of my life. I was you're always nervous when you're starting something new. I was nervous about giving up the stability of working with this large global organization. After all these years of entrepreneurship, there's something about that salary and the benefits package that really agreed with my wife. We're on the road all the time, but I think she was okay with it. So honestly, as soon as I told my wife about this in early October of 2022, she had the administrative background. She ran the back office in our brokerage. She was really good at it. So as soon as I told her the idea, she's like, that's a great idea. You should do it. So with her approval and blessing, it gave me the confidence. But I was still, you're still nervous. And then I raised my first round of angel money from some of the people that we've talked about on this podcast already, just some really great folks from the freight tech world. And with my friends' money behind me and their confidence, then I had to build something, right? So I would say how was building Upwell from the moment I took their money, and from the moment I spoke it to truth and I told my wife, there was a lot of pressure. And in the back of your mind, you're wondering, I'm telling everybody this is going to work, but is it? This doesn't exist today. If I build it, will they come? And so that time, I would say from when I left ZBox in June until we showed the product in its first kind of version of completeness, February 1st, 2nd, that period of time, I had to just keep a positive face on. But for me, being a sales guy with nothing to sell, and I'm the one instructing all of these engineers on what to build every day, largely off of my own intuition, without having any customer validation. We had no product to put in front of a customer and say, is this what you want? We had a lot of conversations going on with design partners and early customers, but we didn't have anything to give them and let them tweak with, right? So that time from June to February was dark. That's hard. That's hard when I want to be out selling something, but I had nothing to sell. I really didn't want to talk too much about it because there's really no point of talking about it until it's built. If it's a good idea, why tell the world about it and let somebody else start? If it's a bad idea, let's just find that out on our own. So I would say that time was hard, and it was unique for me because I've been, co-founder before. I've been on these early teams, but I'd never been the CEO that walked away from something and sat there looking at code that I had no idea what it meant every single day on these meetings. But the best part was, we had a lot of conversations, president, CFO, CEO level, all through the back half of last year and early this year. But it was once we got on those early demo calls, and we saw that what I call the back office superheroes. And these are my people. These are the people that are picking up the pieces when the broker is out making promises. These are the people that you're not taking a big award from an RFP unless this woman says, yeah, that's good freight. These are the people that are going to make sure every order moves. They're going to make sure everything's invoiced. And when your customer's pissed, they're going to be on the call with you. So when I got to those people and we got to start showing those people at big companies exactly what our platform did, that was like the big unlock. And like, that's what has me so motivated, because I started off building Upwell for the small broker like me, the $5 to $50 million a year person that needed an accountant but doesn't have one. And if we could build that in a box, that's what I wanted to build. As I started showing it to bigger companies, what I saw is those companies saw that platform. They're like, really cool. That thing you're doing with those bank portals right there, we need that right now. And some companies would say that. And what you're doing with cash application over there, posting my remittances, we need that too. And then I started seeing opportunities with breakthrough fuel integrations and stuff. So what we've created now is we've got, a very fast growing customer base, and we've got an equal distribution of large enterprise, some of the top logos in the industry, some of the top 10, 15 companies out there that everybody on this podcast is going to know about are on the platform and they're using us. They're working with the bank portals. They're doing cash applications. Some of them are doing their credit card or ACH payments with us. And then we've got this really fast growing cohort of small brokers that are 10 to 50 million, 10 to 100 million that are using us for that end-to-end full billing and receivable suite that we built, for the automation. And so that's what has me really inspired, is seeing that the product is out in the wild, it's working, people want it. And every day we're having customer calls with existing customers, checking in on their progress, and they're coming to us with new ideas. And the best thing, and I'm sure you guys feel this with Shipper CRM, is when your customer tells you something that they want, it's already on your roadmap.
Yes.
And now you're like, okay, like,
Yeah.
we're getting somewhere. So those are the goosebump moments, man. That's why we all do what we do. And so now that I'm back in this mode and like, I can feel confident, like I'm back out and I'm on the road and I'm in front of people again. Like, this is what I was born to do. And everything I've done up until now has really, like, professionally, put me in this position to do this, to change the way that things happen in our industry. And if it's not me, it's going to be somebody else in the next 10 years. But this is the opportunity.
Good for you, man. That's awesome. That's really awesome that, you took that leap of faith. Having a supportive partner in life is, I think, really important and underappreciated.
The most important decision you guys are ever going to make in your life, boys, is who you spend your life with. And I got lucky. I met her when I was 17 years old. And I chased her around for years, and I got lucky that she let me stay.
Nice. That's amazing. Charley, thank you so much for flying into this. This is an amazing interview. Absolutely loved it. I know our audience will love it too. We do have to wrap it up here. Anything you want to say before we finish off? I don't know, maybe something you want to just add on?
Yeah, man. I want to give you guys credit. Paul, I met you a couple of years ago, just, a curious guy, really charming, polite, kind to everybody. And, right at that time, I was building, I can't remember exactly what I was doing, but I had written, for FreightWaves, I had written about the 4 meme accounts that every broker needed to follow. And I think I wrote about that in maybe 2019 or 2020. And the hot meme account at that time was like, truck order not used.
The detention denied.
I
hate freight.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, maybe I hate freight was on that list. I can't remember, but
I think it was.
But I remember, like, you came kind of like after that group. But I remember, like, immediately when I met you, just like, yeah, I like this guy. And so, we built a relationship just casually online, like most of my friends I meet just online. But, when you really started getting FreightCaviar going and you reached out, you're like, look, like, let's talk about, and I was helping a lot of founders that time. You're like, let's talk about, what I have. And I have these ideas. And then you shared with me, like, I knew, like, you really wanted to build something impressive, and you wanted to build something that was going to change the industry, and that you were willing to put the work in and put in the time and build the network and listen to people to build something that was special. And, at that time, like, you were at fucking, like, Manhattan Beach, like, asking people, like, hey, how much do you think a truckload to Dallas should cost? And I thought that was so awesome. But then I met you. I'm like, dude, like, this guy's not, like, this isn't like an online personality. Like, this guy's smart and is trying to build something. And then we talked about a product that you could build to monetize FreightCaviar and how that could come together. And that's when I met Christian. I was like, I didn't know at that time that you guys were going to work out, because you never know with co-founders. Like, it's always a crapshoot. But I was impressed with you guys and the level of detail that we got into about that first concept that you guys ended up scrapping, which I thought was a great idea. And you guys totally made the right call, by the way, to go to Shipper CRM, get Tim involved and all this other great stuff. The good folks at Triumph coming in, like, you guys have just crushed it, man. But, like, I just think it's important that, like, people understand that you did this for the industry. You did this to be a good person, and to see, like, the universe coming back and rewarding you and bringing Christian in your life. And now, you've got this platform that you've built, and you're going to be able to sell anything out of this platform. But the fact that you bring in something to the market that's so needed, that any of us that have ever tried to go get a new shipper, we've all struggled with that problem. So I'm excited to see where you guys go, man. And I just want to tell you, thanks for being my friend. I'm proud of you. I'm happy for you. And I'm just excited that, we're going to be friends for years to come. And I think there's going to be a lot of synergy between our two companies as we grow. But no matter what, you guys are my guys, and your audience is my people. So I just couldn't be more grateful to be here today.
We're super grateful to have you. Yeah, this is amazing. Really appreciate it.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah. I'm inspired, boys. Thank you.
Love it, Charlie.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thanks for tuning in to the Daily Caviar Podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, or if you didn't, leave a review. Let me know what you think. I appreciate any feedback. If you'd like to have more Caviar content, go to FreightCaviar.com and subscribe to my email newsletter.